Joe Dick, you were the 40th president of the Murray Rotary Club in 1964 and 65. That was about 44 years ago, and I'm sure you can recount some things that were evident in the year that you were president that you'd like to maybe just comment on for us.
I might go back to the date that I joined Rotary in '59. I was sponsored by a good friend of mine, Hiram Tucker.
That was your initial?
That was my initial was
okay.
in '59. And then in '64, '65, I served as president. And I believe I'm right in this, that year, R.L. Ward was Secretary-Treasurer. And he and I made a trip to Louisville, and we got Waylon Rayburn elected as district governor. So we had a right full year. Then in '66, April 1 of '66, I left Murray and went to Louisville with a bank up there. And I made every effort to get in Rotary there, but one bank was all that would
classification system got
they
you.
they had it sewed up, and it wasn't the bank that I was with. Yeah. So I wasn't able to carry my membership along with me. So then I came back to Murray in July of the next year, which was '67. And soon after that, Hiram got me back in. And so I've served in the Rotary for a long, long time. Yeah. At that time, we were meeting over at the Woman's Clubhouse in the basement. A lady by Ms. S.L. Horn was in charge of our food.
I didn't remember the name. Yeah.
And so we had a real good session there, and some real interesting things. You recount some things that stick in your mind mostly, and two things that really stuck in my mind while we were meeting over there was W.J. Pittman, Dr. Pittman, came to Rotary, and I don't know if I should say this or not on tape.
That's all right.
But he says he was giving us an account of pollution. And he said, if you take a drink of water in St. Louis, it has already been through 5 bodies. So no telling what it is now.
Yeah.
And Vern Kyle was manager of the tapping company. And I saw my first bacon fried. Vern came and brought a microwave. This is when they really first came in. He brought a microwave and fried bacon for us. This goes way back.
Yeah.
And so it's been very interesting. There's been so many people that's come and gone. I remember that Bob Garrison was running a little grocery store out on Main Street. And when we'd have a birthday, Bob would bring a little angel food cake, and
to the Rotary meeting.
To the Rotary meeting, and give it to the person whose birthday it was.
Oh.
So there's been some celebration there. Then from there we moved out to a place. It was across from where Paul was, Paul Daly. It was a...
is that what they call a smorgasbord?
Yeah, it was a smorgasbord.
I attended there 2 or 3 times.
But it was a certain, I forget what kind it was, but anyway, they had a room large enough to accommodate us. Yeah. And we met there until they went out of business. I don't think we put them out, but okay. they went out of business. And then from there we moved over to Seven Seas, Paul Daly. And had a long tenure there. I guess going back to the 60s, 50s, and 60s, I've tried to figure what our membership may have been, and these are just estimates. But I'd say we had probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 35 to 40, maybe 50.
Mm-hmm.
We've always had normally we don't right now, but we usually have had the president of Murray State, president of both of the banks at the time, and a lot of the leadership with Tappan and Vern Kyle being manager there. And of course, I think Mr. Lamb preceded him, but I only knew it as after Vern came in. But it's been a very interesting thing. It's been rewarding. It's a learning process. You get to meet people that you learn from. I know I've been a person that's been big in sharing with people in my same profession. We had a thing with the bankers, which I'm a retired banker, and we had about 6 or 7 presidents of banks west of E-Town,
Mm-hmm.
but each outside of the trade area of the other. So we weren't colluding in any way in that regard, but you learn from those. And I think I say that to get back to the Rotary, I think we learn from the leadership of all the professions of your town. And I think for that reason, Rotary has been an aspiring thing. I've tried to stay active in doing the projects. Right now I work with the Country Ham Breakfast. I work with the baseball tournament, and I work with the soapbox derby. And I've enjoyed it. And I think those things, so many people miss a lot in Rotary by not hooking up to those.
Being involved
And being involved, because you get to learn people. You know them better. You have better camaraderie with them. And I think maybe all of these programs that we've sponsored and put on may be one of the reasons that we have such a full of fellowship Rotary Club, because everyone that comes in here says, well, you all got the greatest club in the world. You all have fun. You enjoy each other.
That's the reputation we've got.
And I think that has cultivated that.
Yeah. Yeah, so many comment on that. The visitors that we have, that they haven't met any other club that's quite like the Murray Club.
Free speaking.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that when you went to Louisville that you were not able to join Rotary because of the classifications. That was my same situation. I was a member in Lawrenceburg, Tennessee, and then when I was transferred to Cleveland, I couldn't join up there. I'd made up in the Berea Club, which is out southwest of Cleveland, being up there on business. And so that's the club I would have wanted to join. There were a number of Rotary clubs around Greater Cleveland, but this was the closest one, and that's where I would have preferred. But classifications, they had too many engineers from the NASA Lewis plant up there, or laboratory. And so I wasn't a member until I moved back to Murray. So there's not too many, I guess, in our club that have been in that kind of situation. I don't know of hardly anybody else maybe that's been a member of somewhere else. I know. Well, I was thinking Donald Tucker maybe had been when he moved back to Murray.
Probably Don had been.
I think he told me that one day.
And of course, we've had some people that's left here and gone into other clubs like Nashville and various places like that.
Yeah.
But as a whole, I was with a bank downtown Louisville, and I was with Liberty. You had First National, you had Citizens, you had a couple of other banks. If I'm not mistaken, it was First National that had pretty well had the
Okay.
Rotary thing.
This would have been the downtown club in
Yes,
Louisville, I
yes.
guess. I'm sure there's some others around in the
Yeah,
suburbs, but
mhm.
yeah.
But it's been interesting, and I think one of the projects that I respect the most and have enjoyed seeing the results of it has been Polio Plus.
Hmm.
I know when they first came out, I think it was they were going to raise $150 million, and they came and they assigned each club so much.
Yes, that's
I know
your pledge.
we did $300 each here, and instead of raising 150 million, we raised about 300 million, which I think speaks very well of the program. And as I understand it now, we're about 99+% free, and there's some countries that won't let us in, or it would be 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been one of the biggest humanitarian efforts, I guess, in the history on the magnitude of that, the vaccination effort. Of course, when I was president was a centennial year, and that had been the goal, was to be able to have the world certified as being polio-free by 2005, by the birthday, which February 23rd of 2005. Didn't make it. But it has been over 99%, I think, since that time, and just can't quite clear up some of the differences in about 4 nations, Pakistan and Afghanistan, India, and Nigeria, as I understand it, were the last ones that have been reported.
I think, too, those of us that were here when polio was such a problem with our youth, and saw the damages and permanent handicaps that it incurred to so many, makes you appreciate. It gives you a better feel.
Yeah. I remember at the convention, of course, everything was related. That was a big effort because of what the goal had been. But they have, and I guess it's out at the headquarters, an iron lung that the Rotary has. I assume it's out at Evanston, but they had it down there at McCormick Place.
Oh.
And I'd never really seen one. I'd seen pictures of them. I don't know if there was, I'm sure there was one here, probably in Murray, at the hospital.
I don't recall I've ever seen one.
I never recalled seeing one until then. And you think about having to live in that, just it would have been terrible. But it was a scourge that people just wondered about having children, at one time because of the danger of contracting polio. But it's been a tremendous effort. The Rotarian magazine about a couple of issues ago had a pretty good story about the whole history of the effort, Polio Plus effort, and it's been tremendous. These national immunization days that they have, involves hundreds of thousands of people, doing the one day and trying to get this oral vaccine distributed, and it's been a tremendous. Well, I don't think it'll be too long before it's clear. Hopefully, it'll come pretty quick, and be a big effort. Anything else that you'd like to? As we told you, Joe, or in planning this project of the Archives Committee, that it was just to interview the past presidents that are current members of the club. Mm-hmm. And we're not sure how it'll be used, but I think it's interesting to, I know we've had some interesting conversations in some of the other interviews, but just to give people, whoever the viewers are, ultimately, that'll have some insight to at least there's 23 of us, I think, and there'll be 23 years out of the 83 years nearly that we've been since the club was chartered. So it'll be nice to have something like that for every year, but of course you can't do that. But
I think the Murray Club got a lot of credit some years ago, probably 20 in that neighborhood. Howard Tidsworth, dentist, volunteered, and 2 years in a row he went to these countries, poor countries, and did a month's free dental work. And the Murray Club was sponsor of that.
Mm-hmm.
And the second year, if I'm not badly mistaken, that he went, he took Blanche with him, his wife.
Mm.
And this was quite an honor for our club to sponsor somebody that was of the caliber of Howard.
Yeah.
And if I'm not badly mistaken, Howard was one of those that maintained 100% attendance. And but he was a great member. We've had some very committed members in our club, and they've not only been active in the club, but they've been active in the community. And I just I think it's been a privilege for me to have been a member,
Mm-hmm.
and especially for all of these years that I haven't had 100% attendance, but I've tried to maintain 90 or better. I very seldom ever miss more than one meeting a year or something like that.
Well, you may not have thought about it, but in looking at the membership, you and another banker, Harold Glenn, were the earliest, or the, I don't know, say the oldest.
I'm not body. I mean,
that
it
fall
doesn't
into
bother
this
me.
category. So it's been interesting. I know I had the interview with Glenn, and that was interesting too. And yours, but it's a big separation. Y'all fall into the 1960 categories, and everybody else is in the 80s mostly that have been that were when they were president. So it's been a very interesting project. You've covered some other things that I had down here that I thought were very interesting, and I knew that Hiram, from your bio sheet in the directory, was a sponsor, I guess, your second term, but I didn't realize he had been the first.
He was
first one inducted in.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. Hiram, and then Don told me when he had moved back to Murray a few years ago, when we were out at Seven Seas, and before he passed away, that I had not thought about it, but he said, I think there's three situations where father and son have been president. He says, my dad and myself were one, and then he mentioned my father and he being able to serve. But then looking into it, Vernon and followed Wilson as another parent.
Yeah.
And then the Billington guy and Bob, and then that's unique in that Ted, Bob's brother, was also president.
Right.
And one, so which is a very, I think those are the only ones that
had
have
fathers.
been that. But I had not thought about that till Don was sharing
I
that
hadn't
with me
either,
one day, and
but I
about
can
his
see
dad.
where, and I don't recall any other situations where they were.
And then
fathers.
I found out along in here, and never considered it. I think I told you I was verifying the years off of the plaque, you know, the boards that we used at the banquet. Thought that was probably the best date. And I never did catch it looking at that, but in something else I've come across, R.L. Ward served twice as president. Does that ring a bell with you?
R.L. served a long time as Secretary of Treasury.
Yeah, right.
And back then, they didn't advance from Secretary of Treasury.
Didn't have the progression.
They didn't have the progression that they did, that the bylaws provide for now.
Yeah.
And but R.L. was a mainstay. He was, but then he did say he served 2 years as
Well, I can't recall now where I found that in doing some research for some of the background information here, and I just haven't verified that on that board. They're out at the Courier Center. I need to do that.
R.L. was Secretary of Treasury,
But I know he was president or a secretary for a number of years. Ray Brownfield was secretary for a number of years, as well as treasurer.
Well, you know, back then, though, that was not uncommon.
Right.
People would serve, I know, take over at our church, Methodist Church. Mr. Luther Robertson served chairman of the board for 20 years
Yeah.
or longer, and this was just not uncommon then, but now then it's...
Well, it gives continuity, certainly.
yeah, right. So we've
Well,
seen a lot happen in those years from I started at the bank in '55, and I've seen a lot that's transpired through those years, and a lot of it's been very progressive. We've been very fortunate industry-wise,
Yeah.
and not only as I mentioned before, that a lot of the leadership of Murray has come out of Rotary. I recall some years ago, Jim Garrison was active in Rotary. He's a Paul Harris Fellow, and I think Jim's a past president. I'm not real sure, but Jim was traveling so much there in the latter years he had to get out. And just the same thing with Jim Laster. Judge Laster,
Judge Laster.
after he retired, then he rejoined and came back into the Rotary Club. But I recall a trip that Jim Garrison and I believe Bill Boyd and somebody else, we had an industry that wanted to come to Murray, a graphite industry. And the four of us had gotten some wind that we didn't think we wanted it. So we got in the car and drove down, found out there was one about 70 miles north of Knoxville, very similar to what they were putting in here, or going to put in here. And we went down there and went out into the neighborhood and talked about it and came back, and I'd say the four of us killed it because it really polluted. And with Murray State here and people going to football games and that kind of thing, it would have been very detrimental. So a lot of things like that has come out of Rotary and the members of Rotary, and I think that's one of the reasons it's been active. It's performed community services and what have you, just like it's doing today.
You know, we did the program on the charter members a few months ago in Rotary, and so that was doing some research on that, you know, digging that out of some of our archive material and our old programs and whatnot. But that was interesting too. In fact, David Roos and I have talked about maybe doing that as part of this series, something that we can have in the while we're taping, you know, do something on that, have that in the archives. But I've often wondered about those 19 that were charter members, what they thought about it, learning about Rotary from the presentation by the Paducah Club, and you know, is this, what are we getting into, you know, by starting that? But it's been, I certainly think they were all businessmen of vision, I think, and very active in the community, and probably saw it as an enhancement to their further participation through something like Rotary in the community. But it's certainly been we've got a good legacy in 83 years back to 1924. So.
The year that I was president, I came up with an idea at that time that I thought it would be good if we would invest in some rental property just off the campus and rent to students. But I never did get enough support to get it going. But I thought that would be a revenue producing thing. Once we had it paid for, well, it would provide some revenue, but I never did get enough support on it to get going with it.
You know, there was mention about the Moose Lodge, you know, when it became available about 3 years ago. I think it's been for sale. I don't understand it's just been sold. Isn't that the Moose out on North 16th? I think?
Yeah, I think so.
About maybe the Rotary Club. Maybe it was the time that we were deciding to come to Polyeyes. I don't know, of a possibility of a place like that. It'd be nice if we had our own property, you know, to meet in, wouldn't have to move around and could do it the way we want. I don't know how many clubs get involved. In Lawrenceburg, we owned the club. I don't know whether if it was initially given to the club portion of it, but then the club bought some. But anyway, that was the fairgrounds. And we sponsored and had the district fair in Lawrenceburg, which was a multi-county fair. It was pretty big. So that was our single project. That was a 12-month-a-year project. One time, by the time it finished, in September, you started again. And that was about the only thing that was involved in. But that was because they owned the property. And we involved the Lions Club. The Kiwanis Club helped us with that and promotion. Well, is there anything else that you recall? Or maybe if you do, just interject it as we go ahead. But I've just got, we've looked at one thing that I've been interested in talking with people, that when they were inducted, now, theoretically, a person doesn't know anything about it until he's invited. It's been gone through the process without his knowledge, and then he's invited to join Rotary. And if it's gone through, it's not handled exactly that way anymore, I don't think. But were you much aware of, or have an interest in Rotary, or were aware of the Rotary when you were inducted into Rotary?
Really, I didn't know that much about it. Hiram was a big promoter of Rotary, quite active in it, and he says, "I think you would enjoy it."
Yeah.
And now then, when you take an application, you've nearly got to get it from the individual, because there's so much information you have to.
You got to talk to the individual to get it.
Talk to them to get it. But Hiram approached me about coming in, and I said, "Well, I think I'd like to." And I know Mr. Hart was my predecessor, was very forward as far as the banking staff being involved in community stuff, because I know I ran for council and served about 5 terms before I went to Louisville. In fact, I had to resign from the council, and I had served 2 terms as mayor pro tem. That's when they started the council member that got the most votes
served
would
in that
serve as
capacity.
mayor pro tem. And my first 3 terms, I was competing against the Matt Sparkmans and some very strong people, and I was fortunate even the last 2 terms to.
Yeah.
But there's been a lot of opportunities and a lot of privileges, and Murray's a great place. Murray's got a great Rotary Club. And
You alluded to the fact that there wasn't a progression process that you served, getting to be president like there is now, I guess. Did you serve in any other, well, I guess you had a position as president-elect the year before you came.
I think I served,
maybe
I probably served on the board.
Directorship on the board, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly when this progression system started in the Murray Club.
It's changed a time or two. In fact, it changed about 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
I think maybe when Betty was president.
Okay. Yeah, I know, but when I came, it was 7 years, from the time you came on, moved through all the directorships, and vice president, president-elect, and then president was 7-year possibility. But I didn't know when this other clubs just have a slate, they'll just nominate a president and somebody to serve as president-elect, for the next year, which is good to get, because now, with the district setup and the training session they have for president-elects, called the PETS, President-Elect Training Session, I guess, or seminar, that now by the council legislation, you can't serve as president of a local club unless you attended the PETS meeting the year before.
Oh, you can't?
They changed that the year that I was in they have this council on legislation of the Rotary trustees and other representatives that come. I don't know who all makes up that group. But that came about because I get all this literature as how much you get as president. It comes through the district but yeah, you can't serve now unless you attend You can't serve the
Now,
following
is
year
that,
unless you
is that
attend
the local club, or is that
No, you can't serve as the president of the local club unless you have attended the district pets meeting.
But is that a local bylaw, or is that a national?
Well, I
international?
don't. I suppose that's in the bylaws now, as it was amended by this
Mm-hmm.
council of legislation. It's that council legislation that changes things like the classification. You know,
Yeah,
we can have
right.
up to 5 in a classification. So they change these as they meet once a year
Right.
on these things. They may be presented as a resolution by somebody at the convention that the Rotary consider opening up the classification. Then this group entertains that in their meetings, and so then they may come out of that comes a recommendation or where they adopt it, you know, that policy.
You referred back to the international phase of Rotary. I really think we weren't that involved with internationally until Wilson Gant came in as district governor. And I think Wilson really moved us and informed us of the
It's good to have that,
benefits.
you know, somebody with that contact. I think we kind of looked to Wilson, we did the club through Wilson, as you're saying, but now through Vernon.
Mm-hmm.
Vernon has said that he kind of inherited all of that, you know, from his dad. The work with the foundation,
Right.
and we really need, you know, it's good to have that contact. But I think you're right that we haven't had a whole lot. We've had 5 district governors, Wilson being the last one. That's another thing too. I was wondering if you're kind of alluding to that about involvement, but you had no district position that you've had in the district. We've had very few of that. Wilson's about the only one other than we've had 2. He served as assistant district governor, and then Tom Auer
Right.
served, and I think those are the only 2.
You know, getting back to that, when the district governor was here, he mentioned the fact that it was about time for Murray to have another district governor. And he thought it would be very acceptable throughout the district if we had somebody we wanted to promote to that level. Right. And it's like everything else, you've got to do a little bit of campaigning and what have you. I know when RL and I met, it seems to me that we met with the Rotary Club out at, not downtown Louisville, but the one out in just a real popular place, and you get my age anymore, names and things leave you. But we met with that Rotary Club and presented Waylon's name, and it went right through, yeah. And this is what the district governor said, told me the other day. He says, you all are about ready for another one.
I think, you know, certainly the qualification-wise it would be Vernon, but he just says he's not ready. I wanted to do that the year that I was president, and I talked with him about that, submitting his name to the district then, and he said, no, I'm not ready. I think he would ultimately entertain.
I think he'd like it. As I gathered from him, his wife is not ready for him to be yet.
Could be. Mm-hmm.
That you know, you're going to be on the road a lot, and I don't know how involved Vernon is out at Murray State now. He's partially retired, I think, but still.
Well, you know, he's been what's called training officer, or I guess if that's the right title, you know, for the district, where he just leads these seminars at different time for different on leadership in the district. So I think he would be the logical one as far as our club is concerned. But I haven't said anything to him in the last couple of years. I don't know whether his thinking has changed.
It takes quite a commitment.
Pardon?
It really takes a commitment.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
To serve and serve well, and you wouldn't want to serve if you couldn't.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot from, if it's an active person that's still actively employed, then their employer's got to be willing for them to be out a lot. And of course, if they're retired, well, that makes a different thing. Yeah. And but I think it would be well if.
Well, there may be a possibility. I guess we ought to keep pursuing it.
Okay.
And I think ultimately he would probably be in agreement to do that.
Why don't you serve?
Excuse me.
Why don't you serve?
Pardon?
Why don't you
Oh,
serve?
the district. I don't know.
You make a good one. You love that type of thing.
Well, I really haven't. I read somewhere the year that I was president, or toward the end of the thing. I think it was Eisenhower, if I remember the quote. It says the best two words in the English language are ex-president, and you just or retired president. I don't know exactly what he stated, but you just kind of turn loose, for a while there, and not don't maintain a lot of the same activity that you have.
Well, once you've served as president, it's like I told our preacher when he first came here. He approached me about serving in a certain position, and I said, I'm not turning you down, but I think it's well for us older people to sit back and let the younger people serve in those honorary positions, and let them get the credit for it, because they have ambitions, and let us older ones just sit back there and keep them out of trouble.
Ready to sit back and rest a while.
Right, yeah. And I've told them when they asked me about serving as a committee member at Rotary, I said, I'll serve as a committee, but I won't serve as chairman. Because I think this is the encouragement that your younger people get, and they've got a lot more energy. They've got a lot of vim and vigor. And
I think that just thinking about it, it's like a lot of other things. When we could say we're way down here in this western end of the state, and it seems like most of the activity takes place in the central part of the state, Louisville, Frankfort, Lexington, that area. It's being more influential. That's what I think is unique about the fact that there have been 5 district governors, from Murray, because most of them that I met I did attend for 3 years, 2 years before. I went to one because I was mistaken about the year, to Elizabethtown. Then I went to the one I was supposed to go to, and then I went as president to the district meeting. And so I did have involvement, met quite a few of them. But I got the impression that a lot of that activity centers around that central part of the state, and as far as the influence and whatnot. Then it kind of follows that. But I think the thing that we're seeing now, last year and this year will be the same thing, will be the dual meeting in Nashville for the district meeting, with the 2 districts in Kentucky and the 2 in Tennessee, so 4 districts involved.
Well, that's good, because, so many things here, we're so close together, joining each other, and very little do we do as sister states.
Yeah.
I know in banking, we have a Kentucky Bankers Association, and they have their Tennessees. I know very few of the bankers in Tennessee because I have no occasion to. I've learned more of them down there by being invited by a correspondent bank to an outing such as a golfing outing or something of that magnitude, and you be able to meet any number of them, and some of them are in your own backyard, as close as Paris or McKenzie or some of those places. I
noticed this year in the announcements for that meeting in April in Nashville that the president of Rotary International will be there to speak. In fact, he'll speak about I remember the program, about 3 or 4 different times, to different plenary sessions and the final session, as well as some smaller conferences, I guess. But you're right, that the one thing that they want to stress is that one of the club's activities or interests should be developing leadership, and that's more than just up through. Somebody said, well, we've got 7-year progress of developing leadership, but then when you're through, you want to rest a while or something. But it is, and one of the aspects is to bring in the younger people. We've got a pretty good mix age-wise in our local club
now. Better than we've had.
And well, some of them like you know, Dina, for instance, not drop names, but she's come in, you know, as secretary, but she's involved now in taking the soapbox derby and things like that. It's a big effort.
Active. And these
Big
people, it would be so meaningful to them, and
Oh yeah.
people our age, that we've been through it, we've been there, we've done that. It doesn't mean that much to us. So let's give them an opportunity.
Yeah. I don't know, but when I lived in Lawrenceburg, the president of the Lions International was from Lawrenceburg, Tennessee.
Oh, he was?
Yeah, while we were there. A fellow by the name of Lindsay, I think it was Harold Lindsay, if I'm not correct, but there was a Lindsay family had they made institutional furniture, church furniture, pews and this sort of thing, as well as school tables and chairs and whatnot. But he was gone. I got to know him pretty well, but for the 1 year that he was traveling, just like the president of Rotary International, you know, about 90% of the time, you know, around the world. But there hasn't been, from an international standpoint, I don't know of anybody in this circle around West Kentucky that has been involved as a trustee or anything of Rotary International, you know.
International board.
But it takes a continuous involvement,
Yes.
I think. And generally it follows a progression of president of the club, then district positions and district governor, and then stepping in. But I know, well, shouldn't try to think of names, I guess, like you. But the fellow that was district governor the year that I was president, as soon as that year was over, they moved to Florida from up here close to Louisville. And he was ready, but he said he would have done it earlier. He said, but he got involved. He was assistant district governor and so forth. He's felt an obligation, you know, to do that. And then they wanted him to serve as governor. And but as soon as that year was over, he and his wife moved. They already had property and everything, I guess, and they moved. So I don't know if he's involved in Rotary down in Florida or not.
Well, people think when you retire that, oh, you've got all this time. And somebody, I know I've been, comments been made to me a number of times, well, I bet you play golf all the time. I said, no, since I retired, I don't have time.
You don't have time. You can just walk out the backyard.
Yeah.
Did you, have you attended any international convention?
No,
Did you, okay, I didn't know, because so many have not, that,
Right, I haven't.
that preceded their year. But of course, the objective that the club helps financially, you know, for somebody to go, but I didn't know if you had or not.
No, I haven't.
I mean, just the one time when we were in Chicago, but we had 4 to go, plus Forrest Pretty. Went with Gene Schonbacher to Chicago, so I don't know, that's probably unusual.
Yeah, Forrest was the one I was making reference to. Didn't Forrest go to Nashville and join Rotary?
Oh, really? Is he? I've met him just on a couple of occasions, but he visited last year sometime, I think, at Rotary. He was visiting Gene, I guess.
Yeah. He's a past president.
Huh?
He's a past president.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't remember the year.
I don't either. It's been
No,
probably, 25 years or so.
But he came by and picked up Gene. They went up to Chicago in 2005 for that meeting. The other thing that we've kind of wound up in, and you know, I guess you've got some thoughts about, you know, the motto of Rotary is service above self. The objective of Rotary talks about developing the idea of service as a means of, I can't think of it verbatim, but it reads, to encourage and foster the idea of service as a basis of worthy enterprise and working, you know, in business and whatever the enterprise might be. But with that idea, I just wondered if you would comment on maybe some thoughts about service. I know you served, and maybe taken that literally, of serving in the community. And I'm sure you've been involved, you know, in probably the chamber and other things outside of Rotary. But with the idea of continuing that effort to serve our community, I'm fishing for something that you'd like to say, you know, your thoughts about the motto and all about Rotary really focusing on service.
Well, I think that's the thing that we have emphasized over the years, and And I think if you will look at the list that you have as past presidents,
Mm-hmm.
now those like yourself that retired from another area, maybe not so much because that knowledge is not available. But if you'll look, I think you'll see that the past presidents have been very active in the industrial recruitment, the school systems,
Mm-hmm.
all of the things that go to make up a community, that make up a progressive community. And I can recite you, I won't call the name of it, but a town that probably is not too far from here. Rotary Club is nothing compared to ours, nor has their community progressed like ours.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you see a parallel with those because of there is so much involvement in a town like Murray, like serving on the council or serving on the EDC board, Industrial Foundation board, Board of Education, Hospital Board, Murray State Board,
Yeah.
and all of these things. So I think you see a parallel with the involvement of Rotary to those.
Well, I think that, and the other thing that we have, and I don't know what we call it in Rotary, a creed, or but the four-way test.
Right.
That's the only thing I know to call it, I guess. It's just an amazing statement, so concise about, that whatever we think or do or say, if it met these important aspects in our consideration, is it the truth? Would it be beneficial to all concerned? And if you answer those about everything that we are involved in, how different our relationship in the world would be, I guess, with all people. It's been a very important tool, I think, that Rotary is using.
I hope that we don't let that slide, because I think it was more meaning 20 years ago than possibly today.
Yeah.
And I don't say that to be critical. I say that to, as you get older, these things become more important.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's interesting, the history of that being adopted by Rotary. I think the fellow's Herbert Taylor, if I remember correctly, something that I picked up, developed that idea for his own business. And I don't know what that business was, but that's the way he wanted to deal with people, of considering those things, that everything that they would do if it met. Well, I just read that. It's difficult to memorize these things, but I think what we're trying to do right now, what Greg is doing, is repeating those every meeting.
Right.
We'll learn them maybe by the end of the year. But everything that we do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? And will it be better goodwill and better friendships? He adopted that concept for ethically the way he would conduct his business. Introduced it. He was a Rotarian member of the Chicago Club, if I remember. And then I think Rotary adopted that in 1933, I believe, but it's kind of the creed or something. But I think it's been one of the most amazing
It has, and I think
things. So as concise as it is, if you just look at it, I think it's amazing that it could
I
develop.
think one more could be added.
Huh?
I think one more could be added.
Yeah.
To treat your fellow man as you would like to be treated.
Yeah, that's right. Well, to wrap this up, Joe, I wonder if you've got any thoughts about, how to put it, about the future, what you might think about the future for Rotary internationally as well as our club, that maybe you'd like to see or hope for or feel confident about, or.
Well, I think both, the local and internationally. I think there's a greater pressure being put to our ability to contribute than has ever been from an international and a local also. somewhere we're going to have to restore some of the old things that were part of our makeup that we seem to be losing in the civil community. And I think it's going to be to emphasize these four things, and the integrity that Rotary presents, I think, is more meaningful today than it was 20 years ago. And it's not that it's been emphasized more. I think it's just playing a bigger part in the society.
Yeah, that's good. Good insight. Well, I think Rotary is going to be present in the community and internationally. I think it's going to be. I think there's such a diversity of people, and with new ideas, new input, from these as they come up through the leadership of Rotary International. But I think to Rotary's good favor, it is that they look for leadership in Rotary International from all over the world. Mm-hmm. And different cultures and everything, and I think that's a good basis and foundation for a good progressive vision of how to work with people throughout the world and all. And then hopefully we'll be able to see continued effort and input by Rotary in Murray in this community.
Rotary's philosophy coincides a lot with the religious community. And I think we, as a society, we're faltering there somewhat. Mm-hmm. And that Rotary now has they're thought of as the leader in integrity. And I hope we never deviate from that. And I can see that leadership may have to come from organizations such as Rotary.
Yeah.
And I think it's vital, very important.
Well, I guess I've always considered Rotary, there's a lot of clubs, and all of the clubs that we think about, we can think of our service clubs, and all with the idea of, I guess, of contributing to the community. But I kind of look at Rotary as the grandfather of all the service clubs,
I think the community looks at it as that.
Right. I don't know.
And that's why I think it's important for us to maintain that integrity so that we can continue to be that influential.
Well, we don't have that long until our local 100th anniversary, and I think we can start looking to, the things that we might be develop over the next decade, because we're not that far from that ourselves. But well, we appreciate your time, Joe, and your efforts in this project. As I said, I'm not sure how it'll be used, but as we've gotten into it, from the standpoint of the archives, I think it's it makes us think that if we had more, this kind of thing.
I think it's great that some of you, like yourself, that have committed the time and the effort to do some of these things. And I know since you came back to Murray, you've been real active and instrumental in Rotary and in your church and various things. And I think these are things that are quite meaningful and provide a lot of leadership that's badly needed.
Appreciate that.